This is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct today from Black Facts Headquarters Central. Greetings to one and all. I don't know why my settings over here changed for some reason. All right, everything else looks good though. All right, so we're here at the beginning of a new week, and hopefully we have something here that you seek as you hear us continue to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and we're into the second chapter of his life now. That chapter is called Mascot, and as we read it, it'll become obvious to you why he called that chapter Mascot. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and do a few things here that we need to do for ourselves. First and foremost, go ahead, give us a like if you're watching on Facebook. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. And then don't forget not only to tell your friends and your family, but even tell your enemies too about what we're doing over here dealing with Black history, because we are here to take some of the mystery out of Black history and to keep this vibe going on and on long into this new century. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and do our proverb of the day. Let's see what we got for today. I'm sure we've got a good one for today. We have good ones every day. Okay. All right. Here we go here. I like this one. I don't even need my glasses to read this one. This is simple. To try and to fail is not laziness. To try and to fail is not laziness. There we go. To try and to fail is not laziness. And that is a proverb from Sierra Leone. That's right, mountain lion, otherwise known as mountain lion, Sierra Leone, mountain lion. All right. So let's go ahead and pick up where we left off at in Malcolm's story. We're in his youth, in his adolescence period, going through his adolescent period, and he's talking about girls and going to dances and things of that nature. So here we go. From what I heard and saw on the Saturday nights I spent in, wait a minute. Oh, no, we're down at the bottom of this page here. Sorry about that. They're talking about how proud Malcolm is, how proud they are of Malcolm because he was elected president of his class president. And the way he describes it, it was like you had just bought yourself a pink poodle. Okay? Something really unusual, but not that unusual. And he was proud of the fact that he had been elected class president. But he goes on, fairly often I would go and visit the lions, and they acted as happy as though I was one of their children, and it was the same warm feeling when I went into Lansing to visit my brothers and sisters and the Gohanas. I remember one thing that marred this time for me, the movie Gone with the Wind. When it played in Mason, I was the only Negro in the theater. And when Butterfly McQueen went into her act, oh, wait a minute, almost forgot. I have images here. Uno segundo. Uno segundo. There we go. And there we go. Growing Up X. There we go now. All right. So when Butterfly McQueen went into her act, I felt like crawling under the rug. I don't know if y'all remember Butterfly McQueen in Gone with the Wind, but she'd be the one that'd be like, "Oh, Miss Charlotte, eyes don't know what we's gonna do." That's Butterfly McQueen, in case y'all don't remember from the movie. When it played in, every Saturday, just about, I'd go into Lansing. I was going on 14 now. Wilfred and Hilda still lived out by themselves in the old family home. Hilda kept the house very clean. It was easier than my mother's plight, with 8 of us always underfoot or running around. Wilfred worked wherever he could, and he still read every book he could get his hands on. Filbert was getting a reputation as one of the better amateur fighters in this part of the state. Everyone really expected he was going to go professional. Reginald and I, after my fighting fiasco, had finally gotten back on good terms. It made me feel great to visit him and Wesley over at Mrs. Williams. I'd offhandedly give them each a couple of dollars just to stick in their pockets to have something to spend, and little Yvonne and Robert were doing okay too. Over at the home of the West Indian lady, Mrs. McGuire, I'd give them about a quarter apiece. It made me feel good to see how they were coming along. None of us talked much about our mother, and we never mentioned our father. I guess none of us knew what to say. We didn't want anybody else to mention our mother either. I think from time to time, though, we would all go over to Kalamazoo to visit her. Most often, we older ones went singly, for it was something you didn't want to have to experience with anyone else present, even your own brother or your sister. During this period, the visit to my mother that I most remember was toward the end of that 7th grade year, when our father's grown daughter by his first marriage, Ella, came from Boston to visit us. Wilfred and Hilda had exchanged some letters with Ella, and I, at Hilda's suggestion, had written to her from the Swirlins. We were all excited and happy when her letter told us that she was coming to Lansing. I think the major impact of Ella's arrival, at least upon me, was that she was the first really proud black woman I had ever seen in my life. She was plainly proud of her very dark skin. This was unheard of among Negroes in those days, especially in Lansing. And there goes a picture of Ella and Malcolm as a youngster. I hadn't been sure just what day she would come. And then one afternoon, I got home from school, and there she was. She hugged me, stood me away, looked me up and down, a commanding woman, maybe even bigger than Mrs. Swirlin. Ella wasn't just black, but like our father, she was jet black. The way she sat, moved, talked, did everything bespoke somebody who did and got exactly what she wanted. This was the woman my father had boasted of so often for having brought so many of our family out of Georgia to Boston. She owned some property, he would say, and she was in society, quote unquote. She had come north with nothing, and she had worked and saved and had invested in property that she built up in value. And then she started sending money to Georgia for another sister, a brother, a cousin, a niece, or nephew to come north to Boston. All that I had heard was reflected in Ella's appearance and bearing. I had never been so impressed with anybody. She was in her second marriage. Her first husband had been a doctor. Ella asked all kinds of questions about how I was doing, and she had already heard from Wilda and Wilfred and Hilda about my election as class president. She asked especially about my grades, and I ran and got my report cards. I was then one of the highest in the class. Ella praised me. I asked her about her brother Earl and her sister Mary. She had the exciting news that Earl was a singer with a band in Boston. He was singing under the name of Jimmy Carlton. Mary was also doing well. Ella told me about other relatives from that branch of the family. A number of them I'd never heard of. She had helped them up from Georgia. They, in their turn, had helped up others. We littles have to stick together. We littles have to stick together. Let me see, where'd it go? Oh, Ella said. It thrilled me to hear her say that, and even more the way she said it. I had become a mascot. Our branch of the family was split to pieces. I had just about forgotten about being a little in any family sense. She said that different members of the family were working in good jobs, and some even had small businesses going. Most of them were homeowners. When Ella suggested that all of us littles in Lansing accompany her on a visit to our mother, we all were grateful. We felt that if anyone could do anything that could help our mother, that might help her get well and come back, it would be Ella. Anyway, all of us for the first time together went with Ella to Kalamazoo. Our mother was smiling when they brought her out. She was extremely surprised when she saw Ella. They made a striking contrast. The thin, near white woman and the big black one hugging each other. I don't remember much about the rest of the visit, except that there was a lot of talking, and Ella had everything in hand. And we left with all of us feeling better than we ever had about the circumstances. I know that for the first time, I felt as though I had visited with someone who had some kind of physical illness that had just lingered on. A few days later, after visiting the homes where each of us were staying, Ella left Lansing and returned to Boston. But before leaving, she told me to write her regularly. And she had suggested that I might like to spend my summer holiday visiting her in Boston. I jumped at that chance. That summer of 1940 in Lansing, I caught the Greyhound bus for Boston with my cardboard suitcase and wearing my green suit. If someone had hung a sign that said "Hick" around my neck, I couldn't have looked much more obvious. They didn't have the turnpikes then. The bus stopped at what seemed every corner and every cow patch. From my seat in, you guessed it, the back of the bus, I gawked out of the window at white man's America, rolling past for what seemed a month, but must have been only a day and a half. When we finally arrived, Ella met me at the terminal and took me home. The house was on Wambeck Street in the Sugar Hill section of Roxbury, the Harlem of Boston. I met Ella's second husband, Frank, who was now a soldier, and her brother Earl, the singer, who called himself Jimmy Carlton, and Mary, who was very different from her older sister. It's funny how I seem to think of Mary as Ella's sister, instead of her being, just as Ella is, my own half sister. It's probably because Ella and I always were much closer as basic types. We're dominant people, and Mary has always been mild and quiet, almost shy. Ella was busily involved in dozens of things. She belonged to I don't know how many different clubs. She was a leading light of local so-called black society. I saw and met 100 black people there whose big city talking ways left my mouth hanging open. I couldn't have feigned indifference if I had tried to. People talked casually about Chicago, Detroit, New York. I didn't know the world contained as many Negroes as I saw thronging downtown Roxbury at night, especially on Saturdays. Neon lights, nightclubs, pool halls, bars, the cars they drove, restaurants made the streets smell rich, greasy, down home black cooking. Jukeboxes blared Erskine Hawkins, Duke Ellington, Cootie Williams, dozens of others. If someone had told me then that someday I'd know them all personally, I'd have found it hard to believe. The biggest bands like these played at the Roseland State Ballroom on Boston's Massachusetts Avenue one night for Negroes, the next night for whites. Because you know they got to be separate, right? Even in Boston, Massachusetts, which is not, by the way, in the South, in case y'all were wondering. I saw for the first time occasional black and white couples strolling around arm in arm. And on Sundays, when Ella, Mary, or somebody took me to church, I saw churches for black people such as I had never seen. They were many times finer than the white church I had attended back in Mason, Michigan. There, the white people just sat and worshiped with words. But these Boston Negroes, like all other Negroes I'd ever seen at church, threw their souls and bodies wholly into worship. 2 or 3 times I wrote letters to Wilfred intended for everybody back in Lansing. I said I'd try to describe it when I got back, but I found I couldn't. My restlessness with Mason, and for the first time in my life, a restlessness with being around white folks, began as soon as I got back home and entered 8th grade. I continued to think constantly about all that I had seen in Boston and about the way I had felt there. I know now that it was the sense of being a real part of a mass of my own kind for the first time. The white people, classmates, the swirlings, the people at the restaurant where I worked, they noticed the change. They said, "You're acting so strange. You don't seem like yourself, Malcolm. What's the matter?" I kept close to the top of the class, though. The topmost scholastic standing, I remember, kept shifting between me, a girl named Audrey Slaw, and a boy named Jimmy Cotton. Oh yeah, Cotton's come to town. It went on that way as I became increasingly restless and disturbed through the first semester. And then one day, just about when those of us who had passed were about to move up to 8A, from which we would enter high school the next year, something happened, which was to become the first major turning point of my life. Somehow, I happened to be alone in the classroom with Mr. Ostrowski, my English teacher. He was a tall, rather reddish man, and he had a thick mustache. I had gotten some of my best marks under him, and he always made me feel that he liked me. He was, as I have mentioned, a natural born advisor about what you ought to read, to do, or think about any and everything. Well, on this particular day, um, he said something to me that made me stop in my tracks. We used to make unkind jokes about him. Why was he teaching in Mason instead of somewhere else, getting for himself some of the success in life that he kept telling us how to get? I know that he probably meant well in what he happened to advise me that day. I doubt that he meant any harm. It was just in his nature as an American white man. I was one of his top students, one of the school's top students, but all he could see from me was the kind of future in your place that almost all white people see for black folks. He told me, Malcolm, you ought to be thinking about a career. Have you been giving it thought? The truth is, I had not. I never have figured out why. I told him, well, yes, sir. I've been thinking I'd like to be a lawyer. Lansing certainly had no Negro lawyers or doctors either in those days to hold up an image I might have aspired to. All I really knew for certain was that a lawyer didn't wash no dishes like I was doing. Mr. Ostrowski looked surprised. I remember, and he leaned back in his chair. That's how you know you're in trouble, when they start leaning back on you. He leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands behind his head, and he kind of half smiled and said, Malcolm, one of life's first needs is for us to be realistic. Don't misunderstand me now. We all here like you. You know that. But you've got to be realistic about being a nigga. Nigga. I'm reading from the book, okay? It's in the book. A lawyer, that's no realistic goal for a nigga. You need to think about something you can be. You're good with your hands, making things. Everybody admires your carpentry shop work. Why don't you plan on carpentry? People like you, as a person, you'd get all kinds of work. The more I thought afterwards about what he said, the more uneasy it made me. I just kept treading around. It just kept treading around in my mind. What made it really begin to disturb me was Mr. Ostrowski's advice to others in my class, all of them white. Most of them had told him they were planning to become farmers. But those who wanted to strike out on their own to try something new, he had encouraged. Some, mostly girls, wanted to be teachers. A few wanted other professions, such as one boy who wanted to become a county agent, another a veterinarian, and one girl wanted to be a nurse. They all reported that Mr. Ostrowski had encouraged what they had wanted, yet nearly none of them had earned marks equal to mine. It was a surprising thing that I had never thought of it that way before, but I realized that whatever I wasn't, I was smarter than nearly all of those white children. But apparently, I was still not intelligent enough in their eyes to become whatever I wanted to be. It was then that I began to change inside. I drew away from white people. I came to class and I answered when called upon. It became a physical strain simply to sit in Mr. Ostrowski's class. Where nigga had slipped off my back before, wherever I heard it now, I stopped and looked at whoever said it, and they looked surprised that I did. I quit hearing so much nigga and what's wrong, which was the way I wanted it. Nobody, including the teachers, could decide what had come over me. I knew I was being discussed. In a few more weeks, it was that way too at the restaurant where I worked, washing dishes, and at the Swirlins. And I'm going to end there. That's the middle of that page. Hopefully I can remember just where I left off at tomorrow. But yeah, you get the idea there. You get the idea there that that was a major shift for Malcolm to begin actually thinking. Up until now, he'd been just kind of going through the motions, but he hadn't really been thinking about what was going on around him. He knew something wasn't quite right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He couldn't figure out just what was wrong. He just knew things weren't quite right. Yeah, that part he knew for sure. I don't know why this thing wants to do this. Having problems with my volume over there. Okay, so you know the deal. You know what we do. We do what we do. We do what we can. You know we got a plan, and we're implementing our plan as we go along here. So we will be black tonight at 9. Look for us then. We'll be here spreading the good word. So make sure to tune in on Facebook and or on YouTube. Matter of fact, pick one. Okay, YouTube is better because then you get to see all the imagery, and we'll be reading again tonight from the Black Panther Party graphic novel. So we're going to continue reading from that novel. Okay, it's a historical novel, so it's based on facts. But we'll be reading from that, so make sure to tune in for more of that. And then last but not least, don't forget to give us a like. If you're looking on Facebook, a thumbs up. If you're watching on YouTube. And last but not least, we're putting out a call for as many people as possible. If you could donate $5, that would be excellent. In our Center of Pan-African Culture group, we've got over 5,000 members. If each and every one of y'all donated $5, that would be enough funds to get us through the rest of this year. And we could actually begin to do, get more serious about what we're doing in terms of improving the quality of our presentations and providing more information, being able to do more research, etc. By the way, books like these are becoming rare because now if you go and get the book, you're liable to find that they have excised some of the words, or that they're beginning to excise some of the words, like the word nigger. Okay, same what they did with Mark Twain's books, Huck Finn, and all of those books years and years ago. So that when you read the books, you don't really realize what it is that people are saying. Now, why is that? Is that an attempt to cover up history, or is that an attempt to make us feel better? What is that? Because I don't see what the purpose is. What does that really do for us to not know exactly what went down, except obscure the facts and the truth? And we're not trying to obscure our history. We're trying to bring it out. So if you like what we're doing, give us some support. Become a sustaining member. $5 a month, 12 months. You'll hardly even know it's gone. It's around about $1 a day. You lose more money than that in the couch. Okay, when you lay down and take a nap, it falls out your pocket. All right, so peace out without a doubt. Be black tonight, right here at 9. And we'll continue on with the story of the Black Panther Party in the form of a graphic novel. Peace out without a doubt. And good to see you, Brother Keith. Assalamu alaikum, my brother.